Everything starts with precise measurements. Now, let's do it step by step, together. For accurate measurements, the mannequin needs to be properly sectioned beforehand, and I've explained how to do that in a separate video on the channel. When measuring on a person, they should wear fitted clothing and a proper bra so the bust sits in its natural position. The measuring tape should sit comfortably against the body, not tight enough to dig in and not loose enough to affect the final fit. Another important point is to keep the measuring tape perfectly straight around the body. Make sure it stays level along the bust, waist, or hips, not higher on one side and lower on the other. When measuring on a person, an elastic waist tape should be tied around the natural waistline, the narrowest part of the waist, to serve as a guide. For accurate measuring, we begin with the horizontal measurements and then proceed to the vertical ones. First, we measure the full shoulder width from one shoulder point to the other. The front across chest is measured across the front of the body, midway between the base of the neck and the bust line, from one shoulder to the other. For the bust measurement, wrap the measuring tape around the fullest part of the bust, making sure the tape stays straight and level. The underbust line is exactly where the fullness of the bust ends. Make sure the tape is straight and even around the waist. For the hip measurement, pass the tape around the fullest part of the hips. If the person has prominent hips, it's necessary to also measure the high hip line, which is located midway between the waistline and the full hip. Measure around the base of the neck, passing through the front hollow. The bust distance is measured from one bust point to the other. Measure the bust height from the net point at the shoulder down to the bust point. For the front length, place the tape at the neck point, pass it over the bust point and underbust, and measure down to the waistline. For the shoulder length, place the tape at the neck point and measure across the shoulder to the shoulder tip. These measurements depend on the design, especially how much coverage is desired over the upper bust and how open or closed the neckline should be. The décolleté line can be adjusted and measured based on the specific design and desired neckline style. The bust to underbust length is measured from the bust point down to the underbust line. For the back shoulder width, measure from one shoulder point to the other across the back. For the back length, place the tape at the neck point and measure straight down to the waistline. The across back measurement is taken across the back of the body, from one shoulder point to the other, at the midpoint between the shoulder line and the bust line. Measure from the waistline down to the fullest part of the hips to get the hip depth. To measure the armhole circumference, loop the tape around the arm, passing it under the armpit and over the shoulder, measuring the full circle. Measure around the fullest part of the upper arm to get the bicep measurement. Measure around the widest part of the forearm. Measure around the wrist at the point where you want the sleeve to end. For the sleeve length, place the tape at the neck point, pass it over the shoulder, and measure down to the wrist. Accurate measurements are the foundation of every well-fitted garment. Once this step is done correctly, everything else becomes much easier.